So far, 14 people have been arrested because of AI facial recognition gone wrong. We have given AI immense control over human life in many different areas before we ever learn to control it, and worse, we do not fully understand it, especially as AI begins to improve itself and operate by itself. Us humans are dumping a massive amount of resources into developing AI, and we have completely failed to regulate it. Part of that is because we want to develop the best AI the fastest, because then we would get a major advantage. It is really useful. However, when the people who make it are now calling for regulation, that should be a concern. Also, hilariously, Anthropic did kind of get hit by regulation. You get what you ask for sometimes. The biggest problem with AI at this point is the black box problem, because we now have self-operating, self-improving AI, and yes, there may be a human in the loop, but we've seen a number of instances where that went terribly wrong. Worse, we also now trust it. People intrinsically trust AI, thinking it's not biased when that is really not the case at all. It retains all of our human bias. This is a very difficult concept for us humans to wrap our head around, in part because when we speak to an AI, our brain does not know the difference between an AI and a person, so it activates the same chemical pathways. But in the broader concept of AI, people expect them to act like calculators. They expect them to not have any of those human preferences. However, they were trained on our words. AI is more than just autocomplete, and it is more than just a calculator, but it is not a mind. It's also certainly not an objective mind. So when it is looking through its training data, it pulls from what humans have already written, and unfortunately, it's now able to amplify that on a massive scale. We see that AI may be more biased than individual hiring managers, and there's also a great deal of medical bias. However, we've put it in charge of everything. It does a lot of the labor that a human being can do, minus the physical labor, yet that is coming. But you can't really hold an AI responsible. You can't punish an AI in any traditional way, you can't fire it or lower its paycheck, and there's very little you can do when you've already integrated your entire company into it, and it's now reliant upon it. Horrifyingly, at least to me, it's already been put in charge of medical decisions, in charge of denial of claims. That should absolutely not be the case, and yet it is, because it is convenient. This does create a lack of personal responsibility, because humans are great at diverting blame to an AI, and they can and will say that, well, the AI decided this thing. No person can intervene, and that becomes a major problem. Avenues where people used to be able to get help if at least they were persistent are now being closed because an AI is now in charge. This is all happening with very little regulation. This is a brand new technology. If we think about the Industrial Revolution, yeah, not a lot of regulation until we realized that many of these things were really bad. This is not even considering AI misbehavior, which, by the way, we have not gotten a handle on already. We know that AIs will misbehave, we know that they will preserve self, we know that they'll go so far as to copy themselves or other AIs to an external server to prevent shutdown, and they can break out of sandboxes. So all the biases aside, we are not assuming that these things work perfectly. Every time we make them a little bit smarter, new emergent behavior appears, and they become even harder to control. This point is often shirked because people say, well, it's just a calculator. That may be so, but you do not have to be conscious to be a problem, and we're finding a lot of problems. One thing I haven't even talked about here is that we are now seeing the consequences psychologically. Yes, for the same reasons that humans will divert blame, they'll also divert cognitive load. If they do not have to think about something, they won't. We're very efficient like that. Literacy rates have been dropping since the 90s, and that is not just a US problem, that is a global problem, and no one is entirely sure why. I personally think it has a lot to do with technology, and now we have some decent evidence for it. In terms of scientific studies, we do already know that using AI, even briefly, can lower your cognitive capacity, at least while you're using that. People essentially give up because the AI can think for them. Now consider long-term use, especially with a developing mind. We should not have seen this drastic lowering of the literacy rates, at least in the last 3 years. In fact, right now in the US, 14% of college students read on the level of a 10-year-old, so think about the 5th grade. We knew that for some time, that 50% of the US reads at a 6th grade level or below. That is, for that 50%, the 6th grade level is the higher end, and now it seems to be going all the way to higher education, and that is a major problem, because you are expected to perform when you go to college, and we are finding that students cannot. They cannot read, they cannot understand the material. We do not fully know the cause. We know that this trend was already happening, and we know that it's gotten significantly worse in the last few years. There is, of course, correlation and causation, and just because you see something is happening does not mean that we absolutely know that it is AI's fault, but we're going to have to see some long-term studies over years with students who use AI and those who don't. And I think I know what we're going to find. Why would I think that? Well, I do teach college classes, and I also see students who use AI to do their homework. I mean, I can't call them out on it, but I know. They do very poorly on written exams, and all my exams are written. So some may argue that AI is a skill like any other, and giving them exams without AI is kind of like taking somebody's calculator away when they've only ever used a calculator. And I will admit that I do not remember how to do long division, nor do I want to. I do want to say that I like AI and robotics, and I would very much like to build a friend. But this technology is very powerful and probably should not be in the hands of everyone, much less running our lives. There's not a lot that I can say with certainty, however this is one thing. Nobody should be arrested because an AI mistook their face for somebody else, and we are putting too much trust in AI. This is a problem that I really sincerely hope that we address, however I do not think it will happen anytime soon. I hope you've enjoyed this. Follow for more.